Since 2008, Bradley DCC has been leading the pack in customizing HO-scale locomotives. Specializing in DCC and sound installation, Bradley DCC has taken the basic factory-detailed locomotive to the next level with weathering, LED lighting, super prototypical detailing, and more. If you're looking to turn a plain HO-scale locomotive into an authentic representation of the prototype, look no further than Bradley DCC. Visit bradleydcc.com for more information and a list of services that will take your HO-scale models to the next level. It's a cold and gloomy March 5th, 2016 in Ashley, Indiana. But that isn't stopping the Indiana Northeastern Railroad from moving freight. Today, these 3 EMD 4-axles are hauling over 80 hopper cars between South Milford and Eden, Indiana. The train is loaded with about 12,000 tons of corn, ready to be interchanged with the Norfolk Southern at Montpelier. The Indiana Northeastern is a Class 3 short-line railroad spanning over 3 states, Michigan, Ohio, and its namesake Indiana. The railroad began operations in 1992. Evolving from its initial operation and after 20 years of steady growth and rehabilitation, the Indiana Northeastern has become a key short-line player in the region. The railroad features a classic roster of EMD 4-axles, with 2 GP30s, a high-nose GP7 and 9, a former Santa Fe GP7U, and an ex-Illinois Central GP10 rebuild. The locomotive leading today's train is a Department of Transportation GP40-2, which is on loan to the IN for cab sound testing. The locomotive is dressed in an ACL-inspired livery and is quite liked by the railroad's crews. This portion of the line was built by the Wabash between 1891 and 1892 from Montpelier, Indiana to the outskirts of Chicago, Illinois. It was the shortest route between Detroit and Chicago also, but it lost its through passenger service in the 1930s when the Pennsylvania wanted to compete in the Chicago to Detroit passenger market. The two railroads reached an agreement where they would run trains on the Pennsylvania as far as Fort Wayne, then switch over to the Wabash main for the rest of the trip into Detroit, eliminating the need for the Montpelier to Chicago segment. At Hamilton, we caught the train slowly winding through town. Shortly after the merger that created the Norfolk Southern Railway in 1982, the company announced plans to abandon the line from Gary to Ashley. This plan was fought in court by South Milford Grain. The Norfolk Southern then offered the entire line from Ashley to Gary. South Milford took them up on the portion from Ashley to Walcottville and maintained a connection with the Hillsdale County Railroad from Ashley. This operation by South Milford was called the Pigeon River Railroad. Several years later, the Hillsdale County Railroad went bankrupt, and South Milford Grain bought its assets. The Indiana Northeastern was later born out of this, when ownership was transferred from South Milford in 1992. Arriving at Eden, the locomotives uncouple for the tying in of a few new cars. The Eden Farmers Co-op is one of IN's busiest customers, with several trains a week picking up or dropping off cars here. While at Eden, we were notified that 2 Heritage units were in the area, running on Norfolk Southern's busy Chicago line. We would decide to end our day chasing on the Indiana Northeastern and spend the rest of it watching trains on Norfolk Southern's busy Dearborn Division main line. Our first location would be Waterloo, Indiana, as eastbound 64R was approaching. The 64R is a loaded oil train that was picked up from the BNSF in Cicero, Illinois. Its final destination will be at Raybould, Delaware. The lead unit was none other than the Central of New Jersey Heritage SD70ACE. At the west end of Waterloo, we were surprised to see the old New York Central Signal Bridge still standing strong. Though, with replacements being set up and ready to be cut over for over a year now, rail fans are making sure to get their shots before the bridge is entirely torn down. While waiting for the westbound 65R, we caught the eastbound Manifest Train 14A, with 2 Union Pacific GE locomotives as the lead power. This train was running a day late, making it March 4th's train 14A. We would catch March 5th's 14A later in this video. Immediately after the 14A cleared the signal bridge, 65R came into view. This time, the Penn Central Heritage SD70 ACE was leading the train through the bitter cold. It was almost as if we went through a time machine. Or did we? The 65R is composed of empty oil tankers from a previous 64R. Moving further east, we found ourselves at Butler, Indiana, as Intermodal Train 21T was rounding the connection, switching onto the Wabash mainline and heading south. The Butler connection is one of the busiest intersections on Norfolk Southern, with 15 to 20 Norfolk Southern trains and 5 to 6 Canadian Pacific trains pounding the diamond on the Wabash side. The busy east-west Chicago line sees roughly 70 to 80 trains in a 24-hour period, making Butler the ideal place to rail fan on hot summer days. However, as you can see, we certainly weren't there at the warmest time of the year. The 21T is a daily intermodal train from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to Kansas City, Missouri. This train can often be seen rounding the famous Horseshoe Curve in the early morning hours of the day. On October 18, 2015, we caught eastbound Manifest Train 10N at South Fork, Pennsylvania, as it met the 21T. Leading the 10N was Norfolk Southern's freshly painted SD45-2, number 1700, the Erie-Lackawanna Heritage Unit. to the future, and we see NS Manifest Train 50M bound for Maumee, Ohio, with as-needed grain loads. Note the standard cab SD70 leader with an extremely fouled horn. After 50M cleared the diamond, the westbound Triple Crown Train 255 rolled through Butler. The 255 is one of the last Triple Crown service trains on Norfolk Southern and normally runs at nighttime. Due to an issue with one of the wheel trucks, the train was delayed for about 5 hours, allowing us to capture it running in the daylight as it made its way down the Wabash. Norfolk Southern ended its majority of Triple Crown operations in late 2015, consolidating the wholly owned subsidiary company to terminals in Detroit and Kansas City. Once upon a time, rail fans could catch newly bought GP60s and high-hood GP50s, leading these high-priority trains to various destinations all over the NS system. Before Triple Crown ended its operations in Fort Wayne, we shot some aerial drone footage of trains being assembled at the company's Piqua Yard. The link for that video will be available in the description of this film. After the 255 clears the junction, northbound train 122 slowly departs out of the control point. This train terminates in Detroit and is hauling large 86-foot auto parts boxcars. These cars are a common sight around Michigan, with the former Grand Trunk Good Track Route boxcars being a railfan favorite. The 122 would hold up at Blakesley, which is just north of Butler. There, it would wait for a maintenance in the way crew to finish up track work before continuing east. Next, we caught eastbound Canadian Pacific number 646, a loaded unit ethanol train bound for the final destination of Albany, New York. CP utilizes the NS Chicago line to Butler, where they then turn on the Wabash for Detroit. Canadian Pacific has crews change at Detroit, Elkhart, and Chicago. The 646 would stop behind Norfolk Southern 122, which we caught up with at Blakesley. With the former Wabash signals still standing, but with replacements ready to be cut over, we decided to get our shots at the east end of Blakesley siding. After the maintenance in the way crews had finished their work, the 122 slowly accelerated out of town. It's certainly sad to see these signals go. Replacements would go up soon after this video was filmed at North Morenci and Alverton sidings, which are just a few miles to the northeast of Blakesley. Truly, the Wabash was losing its identity. 5 minutes after Norfolk Southern 122 cleared Blakesley, the 646 flew by with the rear DPU shoving on the end. After shooting the 646 at Blakesley, we went back to the Chicago line at Bryan, Ohio. There, we encountered a former Southern Railway GP38-2 high hood switching cars in the small yard located there. While the 5096 was working the yard, we caught westbound manifest train 11K. The 11K is a daily Allentown, Pennsylvania to Elkhart, Indiana manifest train and can often be seen in the late afternoons in Bryan. This train often has a variety of power, but we would have to settle with 2 -9 locomotives on this chilly afternoon. After the train cleared Bryan, the local would head to CP 342, just to the east, where they would wait for one more train before heading to Elkhart. .5096 is a high hood locomotive which is set up to run long hood forward. Southern Railway and the Norfolk and Western Railway were both heavy believers in long hood forward locomotive operation, mainly for safety reasons before the era of anti-climbers. Up until the early 1980s, these railroads still ordered many of their new locomotives with high hoods, and when Norfolk Southern was formed in 1982, their first orders of GP59s and SD60 diesels from EMD were set up to run long hood forward, even though they were equipped with low nose cabs. Next, as needed, train 51E rolls by with a long train of empty hopper cars bound for the Indiana Harbor Belt at Gibson City, Illinois. Note the unique pair of EMD SD60 variants leading this train, with the second being an SD60E that was rebuilt by Norfolk Southern's Altoona shops. engineer seemed to forget his bell was still on as the local train stopped to pick up its conductor. After he was on board, the train waited a few minutes, then proceeded to CP 342, where the Toledo West dispatcher would give him permission to head west. We would chase the train all the way back to Waterloo, with our second location being Edgerton, Ohio. We lucked out and caught a glimpse of the train rolling through town just as an eastbound intermodal train cleared the way. Pacing the train along the famous Route 6, we entered the state of Indiana. At the border line, we caught the train looking into Ohio from the Indiana side. Finally, we caught the train at Waterloo, where it would make a brief stop to drop off a few gondolas on the rear of the train at Metal X Industries. Milepost 369, with the original New York Central signal still in place, we caught today's eastbound manifest train 14A with an assortment of 6-axle power. The 14A originates out of Union Pacific's massive Bailey Yard in North Platte, Nebraska. Note the refrigerated boxcars in tow. Although they certainly don't need to be running, it was only 20 degrees Fahrenheit outside. With a clear signal, the NS Local B43 continues west. At milepost 369, the train will cross over to the eastbound main. This would be the last time we caught the local and the 5096. Making our way back east, we caught the daily westbound manifest train 15N with an ex-Conrail Dash 8 leading the train. Note the signal replacements are also set up to be cut over for PTC at this location. back in Bryan, Ohio again, and we caught Norfolk Southern 21M as it continued westward. Note the flared radiators of the lead SD70M locomotive. This train is headed for the BNSF's 47th Street Yard in Chicago, Illinois. Throughout the rest of the day, the onslaught of intermodals and manifests would continue. And so would the cold weather. Just as the snow started to pick up a little, train 25N would come into view. This train is a daily Rickenbacker yard of Norfolk Southern in Columbus, Ohio, to Corwith Yard of the BNSF in Chicago. Note the two trailing Canadian Pacific units. At the time this video was shot, there was a great uncertainty in the railroad industry concerning a possible merger between the two railroad companies. The Beaver horse of transportation, eh? Next, train 24W would make a rolling meet with the westbound manifest train 39E. Both trailing units on these trains had a standard cab EMD locomotive, with the 24W having a straight SD60 in tow, an extremely rare sight on Norfolk Southern in 2016. The 39E is a daily Detroit to Elkhart, Indiana manifest train, often seen with steel coil cars in tow. After the 39E, a second westbound manifest followed. This time it was train 11T. Today's train had 2 GEs on the point, with a -9 and a -8 running elephant style. Third westbound manifest train appeared. Train 15N, the daily Conway to Elkhart manifest train, rumbled through Bryan. The 15N cleared Bryan, the weather conditions continued to deteriorate as the temperature dropped and the snow accumulation grew. Our last intermodal train of the day would be the 25Z. This high-priority train originates at Elizabeth, New Jersey, and is interchanged with the BNSF at 47th Street Yard. As the 25Z goes out of frame, we're treated to a view of the Spangler Candy Factory. Here, the world-famous Dum Dum Suckers are produced. Our last train of the day would be westbound 67X, a daily empty oil train. This train originates at Raybould, Delaware, and is interchanged with the BNSF in Chicago, Illinois.
949, track 1, no defect.
Thank you for watching Delay in Block Productions. If you like this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or visit our website at www.delayinblock.com for more great content just like this.